I mean, it is kind of lame for sure when somebody like just, especially when a song is completely composed of like unedited loops. I mean, I have not seen anybody get that mad about it. Have you guys seen anybody get mad? Please, like, if you found a video where somebody's really mad about this, send me it. I want to see that. Well, if I really want to maximize my revenue, I need to go to BeatStars and rip everyone else's beats on there. That would literally be the way to maximize my revenue to the highest potential. So I think that's a good idea. These new music producers are lame as...
Hello, Internet. If you're a music producer and you take a loop from Splice and put it in a project file, leave it as is, take a drum break that you found, put it in a project file, leave it as is that your beat? Are you an artist? Are you a music?
I mean, I guess technically until people find out how you made it.
I would say it's complicated, you know? I think something like taking a Splice loop, putting it in a project file, a lot of people would say that's not really beat making. You know what I mean? But
I don't know what you mean, sir.
If you were to take a vinyl record, record an 8-bar loop, put it into a project file, and then somebody raps on it, you're a godlike producer.
I don't know if people would say you're a godlike producer. Also, there's a big difference between those things. Splice like doesn't really take any amount of digging. At least digging for a vinyl record, digging through a vinyl record to find a good loop. That's at least some form of digging. So there's a little more effort to it. Obviously, you can chop up both things. That doesn't have to be how it's done.
So I think there's a lot of hypocrisy in the realm of...
See, I think he's already kind of misconstruing these two things. Another thing too is like when people are rapping over it, you're changing the context of it.
Of making beats. And I think there's a lot of valid opinions on both sides. So I kind of wanted to just talk about that today. So
I hate when people do this fucking like this tracking shit where he must have like a gimbal or something that auto tracks his face. I hate this. I don't like when people do this because like it tracks every little micro movement and it becomes way too much.
When I first started making beats, this was like early 2010s. There was a bit of a revival of like kind of 90s boom bap music production with like vinyl samples and like kind of swinging drum grooves and stuff like that. You know, like J Dilla, Stones Throw Records, Pro Era.
Yeah, why is he holding his mic with his hand? Why?
Joey Badass, like that kind of era.
Let me hold it like him too.
And
I don't know why he's holding it this high up.
It was basically not allowed.
He's kind of holding it like a toddler would write.
And that's something that I would do often with my friends. But it was sort of like a taboo, you know, like people didn't really...
I just don't tell anyone.
Think that was like acceptable in like the real music producer scene. But I did it anyway. And there was even times where I would sample something from YouTube, run it through a cassette, and then resample it into my beat, just so that it would sound like I got it from a cassette or like some analog source. But it's like, I was just ripping stuff off YouTube. You know, a lot of people do that. And I think the modern version...
I don't know, man. I can hear the 128 kbps here. I don't know. It doesn't really sound like it has that analog warmth.
Version of that is just people using splice loops, because sampling from YouTube is just normal now. You know, no one really questions that. But something like a loop pack or like a splice loop, people hear that and they're like, oh, this is... you know, I recognize this loop from this pack. It's like one of the most popular loops on Splice, and now it's in like a Billboard charting song. That's not really fair, but it's like...
I mean, it is kind of lame, for sure, when somebody like just... Especially when a song is completely composed of like unedited loops. I think that's one of the worst things. I don't know, like... I'm not one to like protest it, though, you know? Like, is it really a big deal? No. It's just gonna, I don't know, it's just very uncreative for sure.
The same people 15 years ago were like, oh, this record has been sampled so many times. Like, this producer doesn't know what he's doing. So I think...
It's also the fact that it's like tacky, you know? Using a splice loop versus sampling a vinyl record, like the difference in the way you perceive that, it's like Splice, doing that off a Splice, that's tacky, you know, it's lame. Doing it off of vinyl, that's cool. People see that as cool. It's just about aesthetic, you know, it's about aesthetic, I guess.
I think just as time progresses, as technology advances, as the culture changes, people's perspectives change, right? I think if you're a new producer, as a new producer, especially if you have no background in music, it takes such a long time to make something from scratch that like sounds good, that's like acceptable, that you enjoy listening to. So a quick way to get to that point is using loops. So for me personally, I wouldn't use splice loops for my beats, but I'm also not going to be upset.
I think it depends about how you're gonna do it. You know, like if you like everything else is, if everything else in it is something you made or something else you chopped up or something, and then you throw in one thing that's just a loop from splice or vinyl, like I don't like that's still creative. You know, that's still creative in my opinion. But if you're just dragging in all loops unedited, I mean, come on now.
With a new producer who's trying to learn how to make beats and just wants to make something that sounds good. And at the end of the day, if you're making songs, as long as it's a good song, it doesn't really matter how you made it. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really make a difference.
I just feel like you're like we're lowering the bar with that to the point where anybody can walk over it, you know? Like my daughter could just come in here and drag in a bunch of loops.
But I do think there's just...
It's also less personalized, you know?
It's just a different game now. You know, like I really like composing. Like I have like a classical music background. So I'm of the mentality of I like to compose as much of my music as possible. With that said,
that is true that nobody cares about how you make the song, but I think if let's say everybody started dragging in loops from Splice, people are going to start making the same exact song, you know, the same exact song. Like, is that not a problem when people are just dragging in loops and then people start making the same exact song? I mean, we already kind of had that problem to begin with. Like, it's going to become a much bigger problem when everybody starts dragging in loops. Isn't that what's already happening in mainstream music? I'm saying it's going to be much worse because then you're just allowing anybody to just drag in something that's already made. You don't have to change it at all. Obviously, the audience doesn't really give a shit, but at a certain point, they might start to give a shit when people are doing the same exact song. It doesn't mean the loops will mash up well together. This is true, but it can be pretty easy. I mean, you could just drag in stuff in the same key or transpose them to the same key. Obviously, you need to know a little bit to know how to transpose them to the same key. Just a little bit. You don't even know a lot.
I do enjoy sampling too, but I consider sampling like a different art form.
If everybody's using the same VSTs, the same could happen. That's like way different, dude. That's way different. The difference between using the same splice loop that's playing the same melody, the same key, the same tempo, versus people using the same VST, which you can write any melody you want on it. There's a variety of presets. There's a variety of sounds you can make within it. That's an insane comparison, dude. I think drums are okay. We've been using breaks from... I think it's definitely more okay with drums.
It's all a matter of perspective. This is just how I perceive my own music. But I do think that there's some...
Now, obviously, I don't really think there's a problem with using loops, especially if you're going to chop them up, you know, transpose them, put them together with other things. Like, as long as you're, like, being creative with it. Like, I'm not even trying to gatekeep here, really. I just think it is kind of a problem if everybody started doing that. Okay? Like, if a few people do that, whatever. But if everybody started doing that, which I don't think would happen because people actually care about their craft, it would be a problem. Also, people wouldn't really enjoy doing it, I don't think, either. It would be too easy.
Art versus business, you know? Like... If you're getting into music to make money and to make it a business, then you're not really going to be maximizing your potential if you're sitting making all your own beats, right?
That's a good point. I think I should start stealing. Maybe I should start stealing. And I don't mean from Splice. I mean start stealing from other people. If I really want to maximize my revenue, I need to go to BeatStars and rip everyone else's beats on there. That would literally be the way to maximize my revenue to the highest potential. So I think that's a good idea.
That's going to take a longer time. It's not going to be like optimal for business because it's going to take more time. There's more factors, you know. It's harder to make something from scratch.
That's not completely true. That's not completely true, though. Because people might actually appreciate your craft more when you have your own original sound, you know. Therefore, they will pay you more. It depends, though. It depends. I don't know. This is all speculation.
That people like as opposed to just something that you know people already like. I think that's also like why sampling old songs in pop music now and like popular rap music is so, it's like the meta right now because people just want to hear something that they already like. It's like,
yeah, I think you could still be creative and drag in a single loop. But I think if you're dragging in all loops, if everybody was all dragging loops from Splice and that's all we did, music would become so homogenized, I think people would stop listening to it as much. That's my opinion. That's a hot take there, I guess. I don't know if everybody would agree with that.
Movie remake era of hip hop right now, as far as pop stuff goes, like radio hip hop. That's kind of where we're at. And I think that, you know, people can be upset by that, but it's like, it's the music industry. It's pop radio. Like, what do you really expect? You know, like if you're looking for like substantial art in music, you shouldn't be going to pop radio in the first place. So
Yeah.
it's like, let those people do their thing.
Well, the thing about pop music is it's appealing to the lowest common denominator. You know, it's something that's supposed to appeal to like, you know, middle-aged moms, people like me, hopefully, also, you know, children. It's like it's the easiest music to access. You know, you listen to it if you're like 8, and you'll probably like it because it's the easiest, most accessible music to listen to. It's like the melodies are pretty simple. The tuning is like usually on point. It's not like really challenging to listen to. You don't have to have listened to a lot of other music in order to understand pop music.
But yeah, as far as like using loops and people being late, like people are like, oh, producers are lazy. I think that there is some truth to that. But I also think that people just don't really know what they're doing, you know? Like, I have friends that are like in the music industry and they're very talented, but they're around people that have no idea what the fuck they're doing. But they're successful because they're good at business, you know? Like,
yeah, true.
In order to succeed in the music industry, a large part of it is just being good at business.
Is it an okay way to start producing or not? I feel like it's fine if you want to start out like dragging loops into like your DAW, like just only dragging loops, because you can kind of understand where things go, you know, what works together. You can kind of get a feel for it, but you know, but like releasing those songs, I guess, is like if you were to only do that and release that.
New people and be like, you're not a real producer because you don't, you know, do what I think you're supposed to do. I think that that's stupid and pretentious. And, you know, it's one thing to like, I'm not even like anti-gatekeeping. Like, I think gatekeeping has its place.
Man, this guy is a fence sitter. Like, he has some good points, but he just doesn't want to like go out on a limb and say anything in particular, you know? Like, I feel like sometimes you gotta like be like, hey, like you'd be like basically like, well, gatekeeping's good, but also gatekeeping's bad. You know, like can we just like can we at least take one side on this here? Just so in some point, in some fashion, please.
For me personally, I just don't really care what other people are doing. You know, like if you're getting mad at some...
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you really need to get mad about it. I do think you could get mad about it if it became the norm, though. I think if it became the norm for people to just drag in splice loops and then call it a song, and everybody was doing that, or like 95% of people were doing that, I think it would be reasonable to get mad about that at that point. If we're getting mad about like 2 to 5% of people doing that, though, then that's kind of ridiculous. You don't need to do that. But yeah, I could understand being mad about it if it became the norm, man. I don't know. I would be mad about that because it's ruining it'd be ruining the art.
Somebody else being successful because they used a splice loop in their song and it blew up. It's like, you're just mad at yourself for not doing the same thing. Again,
no, I mean, there's more reasons to be mad about it than that. I mean, maybe if you're getting mad at the 2 to 5%, yeah, I could agree with that. But I mean, like I said, if 95% of people were doing it, I think you could be mad for other reasons.
And when has this shit ever been fair? When has this shit ever been
true.
All about making good art? You know?
That's
but
true.
Again, you can use a loop and make a good song.
Busy.
It doesn't matter.
He has a good point. Hey, thank you for the sub. I appreciate that, Tubi McGuire. This is true because, you know, placements, a majority of it is about who you know, man. Majority of it is about who you know. For instance, I remember when those Drake and Kendrick diss tracks were coming out, a lot of people were hating on the beats that were coming out with it. And you want to know why those beats were subpar or whatever you want to call them, or they weren't like insane? Because they were just going to whoever they had quick access to for beats. They didn't like go look for like the craziest producer. Using splice loops just to make beats and not sell them is hella sad. Well, I mean, it's better than selling them, but yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying.
But again, you can use a loop and make a good song. It doesn't matter. I think that people forget that music...
Hey, Busy.
And a lot of people think of music as just business and a way to make money. And, you know, those people are going to exist no matter what I think, no matter what anybody thinks. So I don't really see the point of getting all that mad about it, you know?
I mean, I have not seen anybody get that mad about it. Have you guys seen anybody get mad? Please, like, if you found a video where somebody's really mad about this, send me it. I want to see that. That sounds like good content. I need that. I feel like it's a little bit of a straw man argument, just because, like, I don't know if I've ever seen somebody get mad about this, like, or actually be, like, legitimately mad about this. Yeah, I just don't know if I've ever seen anybody be mad about it. I've seen people, like, have discussions about it, you know, about, like, how we should gatekeep and stuff like that, but I've never seen anybody, like, actually legitimately mad about this. There probably are people mad about it. I've just never seen it, for sure.
You know, whether you're producing yourself, working with a producer, working with an artist, like a rapper, singer, whatever it is, just make the best art that you can make. Just ultimately, that's what it comes down to. And for some people, this might be a hot take. For some people, in order to make the best art that they want to make, they have to use loops, at least at the time. You know, like maybe down the road, they'll learn more about scales and keys, keyboards, and like chord progressions and melodies, and then they'll start writing their own music.
Would you get mad if I sampled your track and made lots of money from it? I'm just sampling from vinyl and all that. Well, first of all, I don't know how you'll get my track on vinyl. It depends. Like, if you actually flipped it and you did it creatively, I genuinely would not be mad. I don't really care. Personally, like, I wouldn't care about that. Usually people, like, with some notoriety will clear the samples, though.
I'm a big fan of The Alchemist and that style of production, like the sort of, like, drumless loops, you know, whatever. But a lot of times those dudes are just ripping a 4-bar loop from a record and looping it and then maybe pitching it up a little bit.
Well, yeah, another thing too though is like when a rap producer loops something, generally it's to be rapped on, you know, and I think changing the context, like if you loop something from a record, like you're changing the context as well.
And you could argue that, like, yeah, but they had to find the record and they had to dig and they had to find the spot on the record that was good and loop it, and having an ear for sampling is an art form in itself, which I agree with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really accessible in the modern day. You know, like vinyl records, sampling vinyl is sort of a niche thing. It's not something that everybody's going to be doing. And I think that's okay. You know what I mean? Anyway.
If I send $100, will you dye your hair pink? Maybe.
I'm just some white dude rambling about my thoughts on hip-hop production. So
What?
I totally understand. You don't care about what I'm saying.
What? Yeah, it really depends how it's done. I agree.